Hello guys and welcome back to the podcast. We're in the studio and I'm here with a very exciting guest today. Please welcome Jess Davies.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Excited to get stuck into all of this.
Well, there is so much to get into, so I feel like we need to get into it. Jess Davies is a presenter, campaigner and author of the book No One Wants to See Your Dick. She uses her platform to fight against online misogyny, challenging the manosphere and raising concerns around the safety of women and girls. I've got her in the studio today to talk about her incredible work, our growing fears around the manosphere and AI, and how we can better protect ourselves and those we love online. Welcome, Jess.
Hello.
What an introduction.
Well, thank you very much. Going to hire you to do a nice little blurb for me all the time, everywhere I go.
Everyone always says that. They're like, yeah, you've really picked me up. I'm like, yeah, you're a big deal. First question I need to ask you, though. What have you been watching lately?
Okay, well, start as we mean to go on, which is probably about this harmful, depressing world. I have just been watching on the train up from Cardiff to London the new P. Diddy series on Netflix, Reckoning.
Is it on Netflix? Right, because
Yes.
I've seen people talking about this and I didn't know where to find it.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. I've only watched episode 1 and already I'm like, the devil.
Seething.
Yeah. And my friends have watched all of them and they're like, it just gets worse. I think episode 3 is when they start to talk about Cassie. And then I know that I've seen online because, you can't keep away from spoilers. So spoiler if you're going to watch it. But basically they have one of the male jurors on there. And he's given the thing of like, oh, but it was just very confusing because, one day there'd be domestic violence and the next day they're texting and love and she's gone back to him. So you can't have it both. And I'm like, this is the perfect example of victim blaming and like how when you pluck people off the street to go on jury cases, I personally am an advocate for thinking when it comes to sexual violence, I think there should be trauma-informed specialist juries because we know how deeply ingrained victim bias is when it comes to sexual violence. And like seeing this like in the Diddy series just proved that of like how people already straight up are like blaming women for what they wear or like their past relationships, the roots home, all this kind of stuff. Like we see it all the time. And like that has a deep effect on like jurors' opinions. So yeah, I'm already after episode 1. I'm like, oh God, but I'm going to stick it out because I need to know.
Need to watch it.
Yeah, I need to know like what this man did. And I think more people like need to know that. And what is so interesting to me is like parasocial relationships, right? Like how people are so happy to just ignore all of that because they like someone's music or they like their football skills.
Well, I think we see that with Chris Brown. I think more so than maybe with any other celebrity.
It's wild to me because I live in Cardiff and Chris Brown recently, when he did his tour, he also was in Cardiff.
Yeah, I think he came to Tottenham as well.
Yeah, so many people that I follow and women that I follow who will post about sexual violence and misogyny and all this kind of stuff. And then they're like, hey, I'm at the Chris Brown concert. I'm like, oh, girl, like stand on business a little bit.
I saw someone who had Chris Brown in their Spotify Wrapped and I was like, oh.
That's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
In a sense that I was like, oh, really? People still listen to Chris Brown?
Yeah, that's wild to me. And this was actually something because I interviewed some teenage girls for my book that I wrote. And that was something that came up in a group of teenage girls. They were like, for me, I cannot listen to an artist if I've heard that they've done, they've had allegations of sexual harm and abuse. But they were like, but teenage boys around us, like, they'll back their favorite footballer or they'll listen to these artists because they just don't care. But we see that with women, like that's a perfect example, right? Chris Brown, like of women, like women will also do that. And it is this strange parasocial relationships where it's like, we just don't hold them accountable because, they do good music though. Or, they're a good actor. It's like, right, but they're also an abusive perpetrator. But,
yeah.
Okay.
I think this is a conversation me and my friends had I think it was around the Grammys. We were talking about Chris Brown and it led on to this conversation of like, why is it, I think they were playing devil's advocate. Can you tell I'm friends with men? They were playing devil's advocate with me and love them, but they were playing devil's advocate with me and they were saying, okay, but what makes it different? So like for an entertainer to an ordinary job. And I was like, well, the difference is with Chris Brown being an entertainer and still winning Grammys, he's being platformed. He's being platformed. He's given access to certain resources and he's given not just a sense of power, but a literal power that you get from being an entertainer and that you get from being platformed as an entertainer. Yeah. Because I know people use the argument a lot of time of like, well, he can't just not live his life because of a mistake he made however many years ago. And may I just add, it's not just Rihanna.
Well, I was just going to say that is what people say, right? They're like, oh, it was a mistake and Rihanna's forgiven him, all this kind of stuff. It's like, right, but it wasn't just a one-off with one woman, which should have been enough, by the way. It was like multiple ongoing and men as well. Like he's just been a violent man. Yeah, it's just like, oh, he's a good dancer though. It's like, right. Okay.
Also, like, is he, like, I'm sorry, I know I'm a bit of a music snob, but I'm also like, the music's not even good. I'm sorry. Like,
I haven't listened to a Chris Brown song since I was literally in secondary school. Like, and he had some good hits back then. Look, I'm old now, so God knows what he's been put out. But you just haven't even, it's not even like he's put out recent hits. Like, it's like, oh yeah, no, but he's great. It's like, okay, cool. He had some good songs 15 years ago. Like, maybe look at another artist.
let it go. Like, there are so many incredible artists out there. I just see so many clips of him touring going around on Twitter or X, whatever it's called now. I don't know.
But and the worst ones when he's got like a female fan on stage, and I'm like, you're like literally flaunting it in our faces, you know?
Yeah. But it's because he is conventionally attractive.
Yeah.
Like, he can get away with so much.
Mm-hmm. It's so true.
Interesting. Well, I feel like we've already gone. We have already gone on a rager, but I love it. So off the back of that, we can obviously tell we have a lot of opinions. We've got a lot of things to say, but I want to find out a little bit more about you. And I think it would be really nice for myself and the audience to know a little bit more about yourself, the work that you do, and sort of like everything behind the scenes, really, and what you've done so far.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I always say when people like describe what you do, and I'm like, oh, because I do so many random different things. I think, you know, when you're in this kind of like entertainment world space, creator space, it's like, so I do some presenting, mostly documentaries, done a couple of BBC Three, and some radio work for Capital. And then also do some writing. So I've done kind of like bylines in Glamour and Cosmo and Metro. And then also wrote my own book, which came out in May 2025, called No One Wants to See Your Dick, kind of what it says on the tin.
Love the title, by the way.
Thank you. So that is an investigation into online misogyny mostly, and the digital harms that come with it through the lens of kind of like my own experiences with it, which is something that started when I was 15, my first experience of image abuse, through to today and my work in that space. So it all kind of ties in, but it's so funny because I think way back when, going back, I started off in this world as a model. So I used to do, when I was 18, I went into all the lad mags. So I did kind of like Nuts and Zoo and FHM and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of that came from, one, I just always wanted to be in front of the camera, and like I applied to loads of these modeling agencies. And I remember being in school, like, and in careers, like when you leave, right, they're like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I'm going to be a model. And then I don't know where I got my confidence from, because I just like mousy blonde hair, you know, like the emo fringe and all of that going on. But that was what I wanted to do. I loved being in front of the camera. So like I applied to a lot of agencies, and then they all kind of said like, you should go into glamour modeling, because like I grew breasts when I was 10 years old. So, you know, by the time they were 18, they were pretty big. So that was just something I went into, but also I think that kind of feeds into, I was just sexualized from a very young age because of my body. So by the time I was 18, the experiences I'd gone through, the thought of being objectified for my body, I viewed myself through that lens. Like I already thought like that was the most interesting part of me at that age, you know, because of that's how I'd been made to feel. So I went into that world of glamour modeling, and it was so interesting because I was also doing my degree alongside it, which was sociology. So I'd always been interested in kind of like politics and people and society and all that kind of stuff. And to get people to take me seriously was so difficult, because they're like, you're just that blonde girl with big boobs. Like, that's it. And I'd be like, oh my God, please, I'd love someone to take me seriously, and the commissioners and all of this. Nowadays, because I talk about, you know, women and online misogyny and, you know, women's safety, everyone takes me too seriously. I feel like everyone takes me too seriously, and it's like, oh no, you can't possibly like be a woman who has fun because, you know, you have an opinion, and you can't possibly. And it's just like, I would have dreamt of these days when I was like 18 of someone taking me seriously. Now I'm like trying to prove to people, like, no, I promise, I have
layers,
literally, yeah, an onion, as they say. I'm like, please, like, and I think this goes into how like we're just obsessed with people, putting people into boxes, right? Like, no, you can't be this and that. Like, you can't be multifaceted. You have to, like, if you believe that, then it's that and all of that. And I think, like, yeah, I'm constantly, like, in between them kind of things of, like, do I want to keep talking about these things? Because it definitely, I feel like, has had an effect on my work. Like, I think people might think it opens up spaces. I would say I've definitely lost out on jobs because I talk about this stuff, because brands want to be seen as supporting women until you have a woman with a voice and an opinion, and then like, no, that's too much. Especially
when it's those topics that are a bit darker and they are a bit more serious.
Yeah.
There are like brands who like, they want to keep women, like women empowerment, and it's just like, whoa, you go, girl.
It's like girl boss, girl power, and then it's like, oh no, but you can't say that. Like that's not like palatable to our audience. I'm like, but that's the reality of your customers or your clients or your audience. Like,
well, because the reality is of like questioning and critiquing a lot of the patriarchy means also critiquing capitalism as well.
100%.
That doesn't go hand in hand with brand work.
No, exactly. So I'm always like flip-flopping, like, oh, like, should I rein it in a bit? Because I talk about this a lot on my socials, like online harms and misogyny and just offline misogyny as well, right? And day-to-day existence of women and girls. And then I'm like, but that is not only my passion, but like that is what like fuels this kind of like sense of we have to do something about it, you know? And it's like, why should I have to like stop talking about this to like try and get a job, basically? Like, it's crazy. So yeah, I'm kind of like in this weird space at the moment of like, oh, like wanting to push through this kind of barriers that is put in place of us. Like, you can't possibly like be successful and be palatable to an audience if you talk about like what women go through, you know, which is just another kind of challenge that I think we exist in.
Yeah, but this is something that you have been talking about for ages. I think particularly when you were 11 years old. I think there is a particular story that I remember seeing on your Instagram story, which if you wouldn't mind sharing with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, because I've been talking about this on socials probably like since I was like 18, 19, like even when I was doing modeling, I'd still post about like, you know, women's empowerment and women should have a choice over their bodies and all this kind of stuff. And definitely on reflection, it was very much giving kind of like what people say now, like liberal feminism, and is it really your choice, all that kind of stuff. And now I do
think though, like there is a lot to critique about liberal feminism, white feminism, but I do think we all have to start somewhere.
Exactly. It was definitely my entry level, and like that was a positive thing, you know. And then obviously the older you get, like your frontal lobe develops, and I was like, oh, maybe that wasn't my choice, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But so I've always been speaking about it on socials to a degree, but even when it comes to gender inequality and like advocating for women and girls, the first experience I can really remember is when I was 11. And I was still in primary school, so like year 6, and I was someone who started my period very young. I was 10, I was in year 5, and I would have to take my pads home. I used pads home in like a nappy bag because there just wasn't like bins in the girls' toilets, like unless you just dumped it in front of everyone, you know, and like wrapped in a toilet roll. And it was just really uncomfortable because at the time we hadn't had the talk by our teachers yet, but I'd already started my period and I'd already grown breasts, and like, so it was something that I was navigating and no one was really talking about it. And then by the time we had the talk in year 6, myself and a couple of the other girls kind of spoke up and were like, oh yeah, like we've already started. And you can kind of see our teachers thinking a bit like, oh, okay, like maybe like this is something we should have spoken about before. And that's when the conversation kind of come about. And I was like, well, yeah, I have to like take my pads home every day, and it's really embarrassing because I would take like 2 separate bags. I'd have my school bag and I'd have a little mini rucksack that I'd take that would have like my sanitary pads in it, and then my nappy bags and the used pads, you know, and it's embarrassing when you're that age. I'd always try and hide it behind like my coat, and in case the boys would ask about it and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, like we should have bins here, like sanitary bins like that we can use in a girls' toilet. So I remember writing to the headmaster and like writing it out and campaigning for it and be like, this is something really powerful. And then I left and went to high school, and then I visited and then came back years later, and I was like, oh, and it was there, and I was like, oh my god. And they were like, yeah, did we not tell you, like, and that they'd put them in. And I was like, oh my god, that's so cool. So that was like the first kind of experience I had of like being like, yeah, we can advocate for women and girls in these spaces and like actually make a change. And it's a very small change, but it was a really important one. So I think looking back, I've like always been in the kind of things of being like, no, like, and had that sense of like right and wrong, I guess, and like justice, and always feeling that sense of being treated differently because we're women. And
I think sometimes it's easier to pick up on when you're younger, because you've been conditioned less. Like there will be sometimes now where like I won't really realize something's not really on until one of my male friends might highlight it to me, because they're like, oh, that never happens to me, or I wouldn't put up with that, or that's very clearly a misogyny. And I'm like, oh, well, that always happens.
Because it's been so normalized, like, but when you're a kid, you're like, well, what do you mean I can't play with that toy? Or, you know, what do you mean I can't wear that top that's got like dinosaurs on it? I have to wear the bunny one. And
my very first experience of like microfeminism is when a teacher would be like, I need some strong boys to help me with the chairs. And I'd be like, me. Pick me. It's gonna be me. Literally. So true. I remember being like outraged when I was a child, being like, oh, no. I don't think so.
Yeah, that's so funny. God, yeah, there'd always be little things like that. And I remember I would wear, like, if I bent over, I remember once leaning over and my panties were on show, my thongs on show, and my teacher being like, Jessica, no one wants to see that, like kind of like slut shaming. And I was like, actually, I'm sure they do want to see that, just like gobbing off back to them. But talking about like that, I remember, right, this one is really one that stuck with me, because I think I do a lot of work with girls now in schools and colleges, and school uniforms is always something that comes up. And we're like, what would you like your teachers, like, is there anything we can go to them and say about it? And loads of them just come up with uniform, because you know, there's a sense of your skirts are too short and you're wearing these kind of tights and all of that.
I went to Catholic school, I know. Yeah, we weren't allowed to wear cardigans.
Really?
Yeah, we had a very strict uniform.
Oh my gosh. And it's like, is that really affecting girls, like the way that they learn? No, what is affecting them is you like pointing that out in front of everyone and shaming them in front of everyone and making it feel like their bodies are the most important part and like they need to cover up because of the boys. So I remember being in first year of sixth form, so I'd just gone up, and I was wearing these kind of like knee-high socks, you know. And our female head of year said to us, and she was like, Jessica, like, you're not a girl anymore. Like, there's male teachers in here and like they're too sexy. And she gave me £2 to go and get tights from the shop. And I was like, but I'm still a pupil in school. I think I would have probably just turned 16. And I was like, well, if you're telling me that I need to protect, like cover up now because of male teachers, I think you've got a bigger problem than me wearing knee-high socks as a 16-year-old girl. Like, but even then you can see how like girls get so sexualized by not only like the boys in their schools, teachers, female and male. Yeah.
I even saw a quote the other day, and it was like, you know, the whole debate around drag queens and they shouldn't be around kids, and drag, the quote they always use is drag is inherently sexual. And I think a lot of people, men, think that because they inherently see anything anything female as sexual.
Yeah, 100%.
So when they look at a drag queen, they think inherently sexual.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
But it's not.
No, it's not. And especially like when it comes to female bodies as well. So, you know, you might see drag. You know, I'm thinking now, like obviously it's Christmas time, we're thinking of like panto all the time. And it would be like, oh, but they wear fake boobs or something, like that must be sexy. I'm like, well, is it? Or are you just sexualizing a woman's body?
Yeah, because let's be honest, the panto ain't sexy.
No, not at all.
It's funny, don't get me wrong. Like, I even saw like there's that, who is that teenage kid who's like
Young Bob or something.
Oh,
I literally just saw Young Bob 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, why am I being, I don't want to know who Young Bob is, I don't want to see him.
The less I know about Young Bob, the better. Well, he was on like some show the other day, basically being like there's like drag queens at the Christmas show and it should be about like Christ now. And I'm like, but the panto's always been a thing.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
If you think that the Christmas holiday needs to be more centered around religion, that's fine. You can do more things.
Yeah, go to
more
church,
Christian
babe.
things. Yeah, you can do that in your life. But also, Christmas is also a cultural holiday now as well. And it's like the panto has always been a part of that.
Always.
But now that we're having this like what is the word, culture war on trans people and drag queens, it's like now suddenly the panto is the problem.
I know. And you think back to, you know, all the times when we were younger, when you'd have drag queens on TV, and that would be so normal. No one would say anything. And like you say, going to panto and stuff. Now all of a sudden you got bloody like Young Bob on some. I think that was Talk TV that he was on, which is a Rupert Murdoch station. All this kind of, it's all connected. It's all connected. And I'm like, Young Bob, like, why do you go and, you know, protest about the churches that are being closed? They're not being closed for any other reason that people aren't going to them. If you go to them, they might stay open, but you actually don't care about stuff like that, you know? Yeah. Don't get me on to all of that.
But there's more money in creating culture wars and raging wars on drag queens than campaigning for, you know, because they always talk about as well. This is me going off on a tangent, but I'm going to say it because, hey, fuck, it's my podcast. But there's always this thing of like people say of like, we're losing British culture. And it's like, yeah, we are actually, but not in the ways that you think we are. We're not losing British culture because we're taking in asylum seekers or because like there is, you know, a large Muslim population in Whitechapel. We're losing British culture because of things like youth clubs not being funded. You know, we're losing British culture because historical sites aren't being maintained properly, because churches are closing down because they're not being funded. That is the British culture that we're losing.
And not only they're not being funded, things like libraries as well, because people aren't using them. Like, if you want to help out your local community, go and use your library to keep them open. You know, there's so many things that you can do, like litter pick in your local community, you know? Yeah. Which is so, it just highlights me that like none of these kind of like culture wars that have been pushed by a lot of the far right are nothing to do with protecting British culture or your local community. Like it's all to do with actually racism is what a lot of it boils down to.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, I could talk about that all fucking day. But I'm going to jump back to the conversation of, because I know we've spoken a little bit about it before. I'm going to go back to the conversation on school uniform, because I think that is a really important conversation within the question, well, not the question, but the topic of girlhood and the topic of, you know, protecting women and girls, because I think a lot of people don't realize how sort of, I was going to say like traumatizing, but how sort of like traumatizing or dark the sort of like growing up a girl can be. And I know that people always say like, oh, girls are harder to raise, boys are easier to raise. And then I think it's like, no, I don't think we as a society really have a grasp on how much an average young girl goes through. Just like the fact that me personally, and I know other women have felt it as well, I got catcalled more when I was a child in my school uniform than I ever did once I'd passed the age of 20.
100%. Yeah. And this is something that I see with the teenage girls that I speak to. So I go into schools and colleges and talk to teenagers, mostly like above the age of 14. And nearly every single teenage girl in all the schools that I've gone to, all the colleges that I've gone to, this is something they've experienced, being catcalled in their school uniform by grown men, not the teenage boys in their school, by grown men. But one experience I had in the school was I spent 2 hours with a group of girls who told me all of this. Then we did an hour's workshop with teachers, and the male teachers would just outright refusing to believe the stats we were showing them, which was taken from Plan UK, official stats. And I said, I can send you this report if you want. And he's like, I'm not reading that. And he's going, no, that can't be true. And it was about teenage girls. It was a high percentage, I can't remember now, but of teenage girls being sexually harassed in our school uniform. No, that can't be true. And I was thinking, well, I've just spent 2 hours with your pupils and every single one of them have experienced that. So, you know, they're so don't want to believe this. And then they're saying, you're going and telling all these girls that everything is sexual harassment. And I'm like, well, maybe if you just listen to them, like, then you'd understand it. But it is so common still today, you know, as it was back when I was growing up. I'm older now, obviously, but and I think this all feeds into like the adultification of teenage girls, because I think you always hear people say, oh, well, girls just mature faster, you know, even the sense of with everything you hear in the news, and it'll be about like they'll call 16-year-old girls like women. You know, I'm thinking of like Virginia Giuffre and the Jeffrey Epstein stuff and all that. Oh, well, you know, 15-year-old girls are technically, they're almost adults and it's not actually paedophilia, right? But you never refer to like 14, 15-year-old boys as men, do you? You know? And I think there's so much adultification of teenage girls, and it comes through this lens of like, oh, well, I think by the time you're a 15-year-old girl, 16-year-old girl, you've already had to learn how to exist and adapt in this world through like the sexual lens, especially if you've developed like young as I had, and that objectification that comes with it from grown adults, from your teachers, from like then like your classmates, all this kind of stuff, that we should expect girls to be able to navigate stuff by the age of 16 and just like be like, oh, well, like, you know, and we view them as adults when it's like they're still children, you know. And I think it's really, really dangerous. And I feel like there's a lot of talk recently about teenage boys and how difficult it is to be a teenage boy recently, and the kind of like radicalization, the content they're seeing, and that's all really important and it's definitely true. But there is just no talk at all about the teenage girls and what they go through, because we have to remember the teenage girls are the victims of these teenage boys. Yes, the boys are being radicalized to perpetrate this harm online, and that's bad because they're victims, right? Because they're being groomed by these kind of like manosphere influencers. But the effect of that is that teenage girls in school with these boys are now being, you know, turned into explicit deepfakes without consent by their classmates, are being sent, you know, unsolicited dick pics by their classmates without consent, being sexually harassed, you know, teenage boys on the playground shouting, your body, my choice. Like, the teenage girls are the ones who are having to experience this. Yet there's not talks from the government of like putting on workshops to help girls like navigate this, because we just expect it. Or even like parents, it's like, how do I talk to my teenage boys? It's like, are their parents being like, well, how do I talk to my teenage girls about it? It's just, I didn't have that talk, and a lot of like people that I spoke to, women that I spoke to, it's just expected. Like, girls just navigate and like teach each other. I think it's kind of like in our friendship groups of like how to navigate that sexualization. By the time we're even adults, we put up these kind of barriers, and that's usually things like learning to just laugh along when someone says something because you're too scared of like what rejection might be and all that stuff. So I definitely do sympathize with teenage boys, but for me, I feel like when we talk about misogyny in the media these days, and sometimes even with government, and when we have like these panel debates and all this kind of stuff about misogyny, we're missing the victims of it. Like, we're literally erasing the victims of misogyny, which is women and girls.
Absolutely. I mean, everything you said there, absolutely agree with. But it even reminds me of the way that we even look at like women, like grown women, is when people are like, oh, men are lonelier than ever, and there is a problem with male loneliness. Do you not think women are lonely as well?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, like, I know, maybe this is going to be controversial, but I'm going to say it. I do think the majority of the male loneliness epidemic is self-inflicted.
100%.
Because men, first of all, they barely ask their friends questions. They don't seek out community. You have a conversation with, like an average straight man, they will barely ask you a question. They'll barely engage or take an interest in your life unless, like, they know you. Sometimes even then, like, you can be a colleague or even a girlfriend, and they won't ask you about your life. And I think, well, yeah, so it's no wonder that you're lonely. And then I look at the way that a lot of men behave online. I know it's not all men, but the way a lot of men behave online, I think, yeah, you need to be lonelier, actually.
Oh my gosh. I obviously work in this space, right? I've done a lot of research into online harms, online misogyny, which means I spend a lot of time in these forums. And now it's just has come like a part-time hobby for me. I'm just like scrolling on 4chan, like, oh, look, there's another kind of like rape, kind of like captions request, and there's another like explicit deepfake request, and oh, look, they're trading that woman's code. Like, this is what they do, and I like to know what they do, because I'm like, you can't get away with it, like, when we can see it. Anyway, but it's like the scale at which that is happening, that's not just some weird creepy old men in their mum's basement. Like, this is the men in our lives, the teenage boys. And yes, we know not all men, but enough men are, even if they're not engaged in that content, they're viewing it, right? Because you might see like images of women that have been shared without their consent in folders, 1 million views, right? Okay, so even if you're not the one sharing it, you're seeing it. And so you're still perpetrating that harm, So I think definitely when it comes to male loneliness epidemic, it's like, again, it's like that's been hijacked as a conversation now as like, oh, the poor men. And yeah, it's difficult, but it's also difficult for women as well, When we talk about male mental health, a very important topic, but do we ever hear the term women's mental health? No, it's just, oh, that's their separate thing.
No, that's hysteria.
Yeah, exactly.
That's your period, darling.
Yeah, well,
what do you need women's mental health? You're on your monthlies.
Misogyny. And it's like, again, yes, that, and it's not to say that all these things aren't important, but then it's like seen through a lens, which means that it kind of puts the burden on women. Like, oh, it's our problem.
Exactly.
The male loneliness epidemic is our problem. Like, we're not having enough kids. And it's like, again, so much of this actually, how it affects men, how it affects women, comes down to capitalism, And it's like, yes, women also are struggling. Like, women also can't pay their bills. Women are also suffering with mental health. But like, they're not going around like perpetrating this harm online or offline.
Well, women have been at a disadvantage in all of those categories. Well, historically, but now we're at a time period where women are doing better than men in a lot of categories and a lot of fields and a lot of intersections. And it's just like, now it feels like women are finally doing better than men. It seems like there needs to be a way to pull women back. And it's like, when men are falling behind, boys are falling behind. Yeah, they're not working hard enough. They're not trying hard enough. Like, I'm sorry, I feel like I feel like 2 years ago, if you'd asked me about the male loneliness epidemic, I would have had a lot more patience for it, and I probably would have really empathised for it. Over that time, I have found my patience has dwindled, and I'm a very patient person. I like to think I'm a very empathetic person. But when I see, and when I experience and have experienced, I would say since I was maybe like, as you said, a child, maybe like 12, 13 is my kind of, I was around 12 or 13 years old. That was my first experience with like sexual violence and sexual harassment. And over that time, I don't think we really realised like the grating down that has on women. And it's almost like it grates you down. And then they'll turn around and say, men are lonely, men are struggling. And it's like, yeah, we all are, because we're all under the wheels of patriarchy and capitalism. But like, as you say, we're not having the conversation of like, how is that impacting the victims of misogyny?
Yeah.
Of course I want the male suicide rate to decline. Of course I do. Of course I don't want men to feel lonely, because I think when men are lonelier, I think that is actually going to raise misogyny.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's going to make all those things worse. Of course I do. But I just find it so hard to hear a lot of this blame being put on women, and because women aren't marrying and women aren't having kids and all of these things. And it's like, all of that blame is, even if it's subconscious, although I do think a lot of it is conscious, it is pinning a blame on women, as you say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the thing, right? I think a lot of men get their backs up when they hear us like even talking about this, right? This is gonna like
Oh,
get
the
a lot
amount
of
of
men
times
gonna
I've
be
been
angry.
called a misandrist.
Oh, 100%. But it's like the thing is, feminism is a positive thing for all of us. Like it is not great for us all to be living under this patriarchy. Like, but when we talk about like male loneliness epidemic, right, and how difficult it is for men recently and all that kind of things, and then we say about community and stuff, and you know, being in your feelings, or the male mental health crisis, because you know men can't cry, right? Who's stopping you from crying?
I saw a tweet the other day and it was like, men aren't allowed to cry. It's like, yeah, well, you're also not allowed to rape, but you still manage that.
Well, you said it, not me. I was going to say, I've seen that kind of stuff. But it's so true. It's like, we're not allowed to cry. And it's like, right, but who's stopping you? Like, no one's physically stopping you. The only people who are stopping you are the parameters of this male man, like, invisible man box that's been put on you from patriarchal stigmas. Like you have the keys to break out of that. Like that is on you, and that is on your bros around you and your generational like masculinity that's been passed down from your parents. And it's gonna be hard, but you actually can decide to be in your feels and like work on yourself. But when it comes to the harms of the patriarchy on women, that's actually not on us to change, because we can't stop men abusing us, harming us, like whether it's physically or online. We can't stop that. So it's like, but you actually can stop it. So it's like, yes, you are being dragged down by this, and it is really difficult for men and boys, but like they also hold the key, but we don't. So it's like we have to work together, but like they actually have to want to be better as well. Yeah. Instead of like seeing themselves only as victims, but then like somehow it's a blame on us. And the only way we can help them is by basically like bending over and like sacrificing our own, like whether that's our mental health, our physicality, like, you know, all of our kind of like barriers and our boundaries is what's going to improve, like basically fix it for them. Yeah. But like they can actually fix it for the both of us. They just have to want to.
And I think as well, this conversation never gets intersectional about, we never have a conversation about disabled men's mental health, which I would have a lot of time for. Yeah. You know, we never really have the conversation about the health, the mental health of black men. You know, God forbid, what about Palestinian men? What about male asylum seekers?
This one always gets me, right, because I'm not being funny, but it's always the same guys like, oh, when's International Men's Day? Like, oh, it's so difficult to be a man, the man's mental health crisis, the male suicide rate. Yeah, all really important things, right? Then when it comes to male asylum seekers, right, coming over on boats, it's like, why is it all the men? Send them back. Okay, what happened to it's really difficult for men to be the providers of their family and to hold that? Oh, but not these guys, right? Oh, what happened to the men's mental health crisis? All right, not these guys who are in desperate positions. Oh no, like you don't care about them. So it's like, so actually what are you saying? All you care about is either like making this an issue to kind of distract from feminism, or you only care about certain men, which is, I think it's both of them really. Like they only care about men that look like them, and then they only care about these conversations when it's a way of distracting from any conversation about feminism. Like you talk about women and what women go through, it's like, what about men? It's like, hey, we can actually have both them conversations, and you can have that conversation and I can have this one, because I don't have to talk about that every time we talk about that.
Well, it's a little bit like having your, you know, there would always be that kid at a birthday party that would try and blow out the birthday kid's birthday cake.
That's so true.
That's kind of what it's like trying to talk about any like feminist issue, and you've got like a kid trying to blow your birthday cake out, and it's like, you get a birthday, you need to host a party.
I love that. Like that, you've just explained it exactly that, because it's so true. Like that's what I comment now. Every time a man will comment under my stuff, what about men? Men experience. I go, yeah, they do, and you can post content about that.
Yeah, you make a post.
Nothing's stopping you about that. Nothing's stopping you from campaigning for more men's spaces. Nothing's stopping you them writing to your MP to try and get better mental health services. Like all this kind of stuff you can do, but instead you're in my comment section telling me I should do it. Cool, I'm doing my bit, but I'm doing it for women. You can do it for men too, and they're both very important. But like, that's on you.
And also as well, what makes me laugh is like women would be so quick to to support a man who had a genuine cause and was trying to genuinely support men's mental health without distracting. If they were equally supporting the issues we're talking about and weren't trying to distract, I know so many women that would stand by that and support that as well. That they would have so much support.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you look
the majority of them don't.
Yeah, you look at the female spaces and you look at when we're talking about like gender-based violence and online misogyny, all of that. Like there is men who are invited onto these panels and talks because they're welcomed in, because we know as feminists, like this is something that we all need to combat together. Like it's a collective thing. We need men. We cannot stop this without men, because like we say, they are the ones perpetrating this harm. So it's like, yeah, that's great, welcome in, but if you're gonna come in just to kind of like hijack the conversation, we're not gonna get anywhere, you know? Yeah.
Just give us a little bit of an insight into what current dangers are like teenage girls facing, whether that's online and seeping into the real world, because it definitely does seep from the online world into the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, a lot of the work I do is in digital harms, so online misogyny mostly. So I wrote a book which researched stuff like deepfake abuse, image abuse, cyberflashing, doxing, catfishing, all this kind of stuff. And unfortunately, the internet is a gendered experience. So that means that women and girls are more likely to be victims of all them things, you know, doxing, catfishing, image abuse, deepfake abuse, sexual harassment online. Then we talk about intersectionality. We know that disabled girls are more likely to experience sexual harassment online and offline. We know that black girls are more likely to experience cyberflashing online and sexual harassment. So there's all of these things. And unfortunately, a lot of teenage girls are being victimized of this harm in these kind of spaces online by, you know, grown men, but also the teenage boys, you know, that they are in their classes. And yes, not all the teenage boys, of course, but it will be things like there's been a rise in deepfake abuse. So this will be when you can put someone's face onto a different body, but there's lots of different AI tools that you can use. One of the terms is nudification tools. So this was AI technology that removed the clothes from a girl or a woman in an image and replaced it with a fake naked body, which is computer generated. Now, so much of this coding doesn't work on male bodies because it just hasn't been created, because the desire just isn't there, because a lot of the perpetrators of this are men and boys. Like, women and girls just aren't doing this. You know, I'm sure maybe there are a couple out there, but just not. So even if you put a male image through there, it would generate a female body, because that's just what the coding is. So there is so many cases now in the UK, but across the world, of teenage girls who've been targeted by this harm. And, you know, these fake images of them are being shared around their school without their consent. They've been generated without their consent. And it's like, how do you even begin to deal with that? Like, my first experience of image abuse was when I was 15, and it was my real images that I had sent to someone who was another boy in my school, and they got sent around my school without consent, around my hometown without consent. You know, adult men had them on their phones, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, that was scary enough, and it definitely is when it's really you, obviously. But now to know that someone can do that without you even having to take that photo, you know, like someone can have one photo of you taken from your social media and turn you into a very realistic image or video. And that's what's been so scary for me, is to see how much this technology has developed in the last like 2-3 years. So I first started looking into deepfake abuse in 2021. And I did a documentary that came out in 22, I think, for BBC Three, which is called Deepfake Porn, Could You Be Next? And it was looking at deepfake abuse. The term used to be deepfake porn, if we don't call it that now, but it was looking at deepfake abuse. And back then, like, you could kind of tell, like, there wasn't that many really great, like, technology available to the everyday person. Whereas now, like, I see some of these videos or images and I'm like, I wouldn't be able to tell, you know? And that has a really big effect on the victim, because a lot of people, their excuse, right, will be, well, it's not real. So like, what, you know, it's not that big of a deal. Like, it's not real. It's not really you. Like, what's the problem? But from the victims that I spoke to who have been targeted by this, like, that emotional trauma and having your body taken from you, your consent taken from you, your body exploited for someone else's pleasure, or whether it's, you know, for humiliation, whatever it is, like, you don't have that choice. That feels very real. You know, victims have said to me, like, it felt like how realistic as physical assault that they experienced felt, because you're having your consent taken away from you, you know. And then there's the added thing of it being shared online to all these different people. So you're losing, you know, power in that sense. You're losing control of, like, not knowing where it is. You might be able to file like a DMCA takedown from a certain forum to get it taken down, but it could just be re-uploaded again. So from victims of image abuse, which includes deepfake abuse that I've said, like, spoken with, they're like, I can't even use the term PTSD, because this isn't a post-trauma. Like, it lives with you forever, that sense of like, well, where could it be shared now, and who might have it now, and it might reappear in 5 years time and come back to like constantly re-trigger you again and again. So that is something definitely which is really scary, and which is on the rise when it comes to teenage girls.
I'm actually reading a book at the moment. I say reading, I'm listening to an audio book on this very topic. It's by the incredible Laura Bates.
Yes.
Is it The New Age of Sexism? I'm trying to remember the title. It's got like two parts of the title. I can't remember the first bit, but it's The New Age of Sexism. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, it's taken me a while to get through it, just because, don't get me wrong, it's fantastic, and I actually love Laura Bates's work, but it's harrowing.
Yeah.
And a lot of the chapters are really heavy, so I'm not ploughing through it. I'm just sort of taking my time with it and really taking it in, which I think is a good way to read books, to be honest with you. But it is, this exact topic is the chapter that I've just finished, and she spent a lot of time actually in like VR VR. What is the word? Like
like the VR headsets, kind of like
yes, but like the chat rooms, the playrooms where there are a lot of like young people in there, and a lot of them were being like, is the term like digitally raped, digitally assaulted, and a lot of people, the responses were just log off. And it's like, one, like, we need to recognize that, like, that is a violation. Like, but I don't think we have the terminology or the understanding as a society to understand that yes, it's not a physical rape, but we don't have the terminology or the understanding as a society to understand why that is a violation. And also as well, do you not think that this will then lead people to commit physical rape in the real world?
Yeah.
If they can get away with it in the metaverse or wherever it is, if they can get away with it on there and people laugh and they jeer and they cheer on, do you not think that is desensitizing them and chipping away at someone who thinks they have entitlement to someone else's body?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so terrifying the way it's just been so normalized, and all the different forms of abuse that is popping up because of the development of technology, which is just so underregulated. I mean, a perfect example, I think, of how these online harms can be perpetrated in real life is the awful case of Giselle Pellico in France, where her husband was meeting these men online, advertising her, you know, being available for them to come and rape while she was sedated. Like, and I think
he was advertising it as to rape. He wasn't. These men were aware that they were raping her, right?
Oh, 100%. And he found all of these men in an online chat room, which has been advertised for this. They knew what they were looking for, and they took that opportunity when it arose. And for me, so much of these spaces that I've been in online, that is something that pops up all the time, because it's unbelievable, really, and it's impossible to even describe, because it's so graphic that people take time out of their day to relax. And it was just one post I saw, it's included in my book. It's how this guy, they call him H in this forum, and he's like, oh, I need a way of like distracting myself. It's been a heavy day, so I'm doing rape captions. Send me in like a short paragraph, like, you know, a name and this girl and her connection and like what you'd like the theme to be. And he would write out these rape fantasy stories. And that would be his way of decompressing after a busy day. And it's like, so many men, and I was on the forum the other day, the same forum, and I saw him still popping up, and I wrote about it in my book, which I wrote about a year ago. So like, this is an ongoing thing for over a year. He's got fans now. They're like, yay, H is back. And there's so many men are doing this, posting images of these women that they know in real life, and like, write one about her. And it just has me thinking, like, at what point is it not enough for you that you're doing this online and it crosses over into offline worlds? And it does, and that's what's so scary, and we see so often in these spaces. And I think like that's why we can never just minimize this harm as being like, oh well, it's just something online, because behind every single perpetrator online doing that is a real person, and behind every victim is a real human as well. And that's what, for me, I always try and like bring it back to, like, this isn't just like robots that are perpetrating this harm online. Like, there is a person behind that who think that that's okay. So like, at what line does that stop where they think that's okay, but I won't ever do it in the real world? Like, well, the online world is the real world. We all live in this world now, you know, we're all existing online, we're digital citizens online. So for me, like, that is what's so dangerous, that it's just so normalized and just brushed off as harmless, because it's just online. But it's like, these are real men behind who are doing this. And what I see so often in the forums, which is terrifying, is how many men are doing this to the women that they live with in terms of family members. Like, the amount of requests I see for whether it's deep fake abuse, image abuse, creep shots, which is images taken without consent, of sisters, of mums, cousins, aunts, girlfriends, ex-girlfriends, colleagues. Like, these are men who are doing it to the women that they know. These men, we sit down with them around the dinner table. You have a cup of tea with them at work. Like, you know, you catch the tube with them. Like, these are men in our everyday lives. And these, like, you don't even know. Like, these women don't even know that you might be lying next to, like, this monster at night, or that, you know, you sit down and have dinner with your dad who's, like, doing this. And it sounds awful to say out loud, but, like, that is what's happening, but on such a mass scale, and that's terrifying to me.
And I think people as well, they don't realise what a mass scale it is. And I think, like, maybe now, because of the internet, because of TikTok, I have seen horror story after horror story of women sharing their experiences. And I think that's the thing, like, it's important to acknowledge as well. It's not just happening on 4chan or Reddit, or don't get me wrong, it is in these deep oh, my voice went then. It is happening in these deep sites where lots of disgusting stuff happens. But also, women aren't safe on Instagram or TikTok or Twitter or YouTube. I will never forget this message I got from this girl, and she was amputee. She was 13 years old. She messaged me and she said about how she had to go private on Instagram because she started to get random men who, so basically her account got found, it got shared in like a fetish, like part of Reddit. And then she started to get random men sending her messages of, you know, I'm sure you can imagine what kind, where they were fetishizing her disability. And it's like, that's a 13-year-old girl, you know? To deal with that as a 29-year-old woman is one thing, that's hard.
Yeah.
Because it's disgusting. But that's a child.
It literally makes me so angry because it's like it's such a sense of entitlement, like, and I think women can or girls can post anything which is so innocent, and again, it shouldn't, as we know, it doesn't come down to what you wear and all this, but it can be the most innocent thing and a man will sexualize it, and it literally prevents women and girls from existing online as a digital citizen, which is all of our right. Like, we live in a modernized world, right? Like, we should be able to access the internet the exact same way that men and boys can access the internet, you know, and post about whether it's our like political opinions or like your thoughts on the football or whatever it may be, right, without the fear of getting rape threats or sexual harassment or comments on our bodies. Like, that is just something that women and girls experience so much more than men and boys, and it's just not fair, and it shouldn't be seen as like a normal part of the online experience. Like, well, that just is what happens online if you're a woman, you know. It's like, but that's not good enough because it isn't what happens for men and boys. Like, we live in such a modern world, like you're saying, and it's on every single platform. This is the thing, like you're saying, I've never even been on a dark web, like, and I literally talk about digital harms. I wrote a whole book about it. Same. I've never been on it. Like, this is happening on, like you said, the fringe kind of like forums and messaging boards, but then everyday platforms, like whether it's Vinted and you're selling your clothes, you'll have, you know, there's been stories of men messaging girls, including teenage girls, wanting sexualized photos or to buy their used clothes. Then when it's been like delivery food apps, there's been stories of women who've just ordered food and then they've had these men harassing them,
which is even scarier when you realize that, like, they'll have your address,
they know where you live now. Or like whether it's things like, you know, you've booked a plumber, like it is literally on every single app, on every single platform, like where women genuinely are not safe. And that is so terrifying, and yet it's been so normalized as like, oh well, just the internet. But it's like, but that isn't just the internet for men and boys. Like, why is that the internet for us?
Yeah, but I really do think in general, in the topic of misogyny, but also in general, the way that we talk to people online is we're so comfortable with dehumanizing people. It really is so scary to me. Like, the way that people will just talk to each other, and I'm like, that's not how you talk in the real world. But then I remember that's how people are talking in the real world, and that's not me saying that like this generation's gone to the dogs because because look at our history, Jesus Christ. But like, the way that we are talking to each other in real life is changing as well, and I do feel like things are becoming more outwardly hostile. I don't know, maybe that's because I live in a busy city. We were talking earlier about how much I hate I hate people who don't have spatial awareness, but you know, like, the way that we are talking to each other is, I feel really a turning point, really a tipping point for like the way we're interacting with each other, and I don't like the way it's going personally.
No, me neither. It's actually really, really terrifies me. And I think the big word for me is empathy, and so many people are just losing their empathy for people, and like we're starting to live in such an individualistic kind of world where people are just thinking about themselves. And I'm thinking now in all these kind of different spaces like politics, right, where it's like it's all about me, but it's like the way that we exist in a thriving community is through community and thinking about the people around you, you know. And I think it's so scary when it's all like me.
Like, and something that really annoys me online, sorry, is bean soup theory. Do you know about bean soup theory? So there was
bean soup theory.
Bean soup theory. Right. You know how on TikTok everything's a theory, and it's just a conversation. So a few years ago, there was, God, it was a few years ago now. A few years ago on TikTok, there was this girl who just posted a bean soup recipe, and someone commented going, what do I make if I don't like beans? But what if I don't like beans? And then it became this thing, bean soup theory, where everything is me, whataboutism. And it's like, not everything. I think maybe that is one of the problems. It's like, we literally scroll For You pages. Yeah. You know, we've gotten to this place of entitlement where we feel like every piece of content is for us.
Yeah.
And I feel that as a content creator, sometimes I'll get messages being like, that wasn't relatable. I was like, it wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the time it's a post about my experience, my journey, or something that I've experienced. And it's just like, you know, there are certain conversations to be had about, you know, the way that we operate the internet and making content or saying things that are completely out of touch. But a lot of the internet is very, very saturated with bean soup theory, which I just love as terminology. But it's people being like, what about me?
Yeah.
What about me? And it's like, well, okay. I think the girl was literally like, make a different soup.
Yeah,
it's
like go and find a different soup. Yeah,
it's bean soup. If you don't like beans, don't make bean soup.
It's so true, and it loops right back to what we were saying at the start about kind of like the men in the comments, right? When you talk about feminism, it's like, well, what about the men? I'm like, again, yeah, you go create that content, or I'm sure there'll be a content creator out there who's talking about that. Like, I don't have to talk about that kind of thing. But yeah, I think there is such this kind of like individualistic sense, not only online but offline too, and I think that reflects in like our politics and all that kind of stuff, and it's really scary, I think. And a lot of this, honestly, and this is my biggest, if like I'm dead, they have no more here, because big tech and the tech bros for me. The tech bros. So much of this comes down to things like algorithms, right? And how like social media platforms push these really extreme views, extreme content, harmful content, divisive content to keep people engaged. But that is literally having such a dangerous effect on our society, which again is making people lose empathy for people. And we see that then play out outwards in our offline worlds for like who people vote for example. And so much of this comes down to the social media world, and it baffles my mind how unregulated this is, and how these tech bros of like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, now it's going to be like that Sam Altman from OpenAI, you know, and a couple of others that like have so much monopoly and power over society as a whole, and that comes down to money, but also like the power they have through their literal algorithms, and yet we're just seen as like they're untouchable, you know. And it's like, but if you've created these platforms where you can basically like puppeteer like billions of people, then you should be held more accountable to keep them safe, because when they push this harmful extreme content online, or extreme views online, or divisive content online, just to keep people engaged and reel people in, and you know, radical, because when you're radicalized online, like you're angry and you're posting all the time, like all of this feeds into it, and it's like you're actually ruining people's individual lives, but society and community through this online world. Like, and it's so
you're making
sad.
people angry. Like, but there's more money and there's more power in making people angry. It's easier to make people angry than it is to make them happy. And like, I really struggle with that as a content creator. And by the way, side note, there is a brilliant Christmas film about this, and you've just reminded me of it, and I'm gonna go home and watch it tonight, because I was saying I want to watch something Christmassy.
Yeah, what's it called?
Oh, cannot. I think it might be Spirited. Let me double check it though. But I do know that it has one of the Ryans in it.
Is it the one on Apple TV? Ryan Reynolds.
Yes.
With Will Ferrell as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's the one.
Yeah.
So I remember going to a pre-screening of that, premiere of that, and not knowing what it was about, but I went along, and I remember coming away being like, that was really fucking good. And it basically is about this, how this guy ends up on the naughty list because he basically uses rage bait as like to make money and to engage people. And so but I feel this definitely as a content creator, because if I don't like rage baiting. I generally don't. Even when like I'm producing this podcast, right? And this podcast is fully self-produced. I touch every single aspect of this podcast, from the title to the description to the topics we talk about, the guests that come on, everything. It's all me. And I know this would perform so much better if I was a bit more clickbaity with it. If I was a little bit more outragey with it. If I was making claims that could maybe not be true, which a lot of people do. But I don't want to do that, because one, I think that's very, very dangerous territory, and I just think like you get into this tricky cycle where you end up relying on rage bait to make content. That's going to make you a very angry person, and believe me, I know some very angry content creators who do this. There's one particular one who I won't name, but I'll tell you who it is.
Tell me after, yeah.
I'll tell you after. There's one particular content creator that I know, although they would not call themselves a content creator, they would think that is beneath them. And they would make rage baity content every single day. And they would wake up every single day and look at the news and find something to rage about. They're specifically going to the news to find a piece of information that they can sort of twist and make clickbaity and make people rage about. And I just think, what the fuck?
Yeah.
What is in your coffee that is your morning routine? And I think about, do you remember, you know Russell Howard, the comedian?
Yes.
He used to have Russell Howard's Good News.
Yeah.
And I just think like, what happened? And I know that it's like, well, there's no point reporting on good news because like, then like nothing happens. But it's like, that's not the point. I just think like, when it comes to online content, I just think so much of it right now is rage baity. And I would love to see more of it be more like Russell Howard's Good News, basically.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, have you seen that Oxford Dictionary literally labelled rage bait as a word of the year, 2025? Yeah, and it's so reflective of the world we live in.
Also, the colour of the year is white.
Depressing,
boring, clinical.
White supremacist.
Well, yes.
This year of all years,
it's giving
back. It's giving that.
It's giving Sydney Sweeney.
It truly is.
I'm like, did she pick the colour?
But rage, it's so that rage way, and it's actually really depressing, because it's like if you have to wake up every day, and again it comes down to the individualistic thing, right? Again, you're thinking, well, I'm just gonna make money from this, but what harm is that having to the audience that then are then going about their day and spreading them kind of views? And this is also something that not just on social media, but I've been on like TV panel shows before, right? And the people that I've been on, I'm very left-leaning, so like the people they always put me on with are like the right-leaning GB News lot. And what was really interesting to me was most of them who I went on with were very chatty, very lovely, very friendly offline, and they would even be like, oh, what have I got to say today then? Like, and they would try and find topics. So like you'd get a phone call before and they'd find topics for you to talk about. And the researcher would be like, what's your views on this? And then they'd ask someone else. And if you kind of agreed, I've been on before where he was like, oh, I'll just say the opposite. Like, I actually agree with you, but I'll just say the opposite for the sake of it. And I'm like, and the opposite to what I'm saying is usually right-wing stuff, right? So it's like, so you're happy to lean into like this, like targeting of minorities, or, you know, targeting of the working class people and all this kind of stuff, just because, even when you don't technically believe it, just because it's keeping you in a job. Then what effect is that having on the audience, who now see them views validated and then go out and carry that in their everyday life? And it's like, to see that play out, I was like, God, this is so depressing, because like I'm not going on live TV to say something that I don't believe in. You know what I mean? But you're doing that, and then you're going to go about your day.
I think this about Piers Morgan though. Piers Morgan is generally, I think, the cretin of this country. I cannot stand that man. And it's not because he has different views to me. It's not because he has different views to me, right? Because guess what? There's a lot of people who have different views to me.
Yeah.
What I find so specifically disgusting about him is he's very good at towing the line with getting the majority of this country, but also still rage baiting them enough, still stirring them up enough, and also being just right-wing enough. He knows the line between things that are gonna, when people look back on that, that's not going to do well. So, and it makes it really hard for people, because you know when people be like, oh yeah, but you know, but he did challenge Boris on the NHS and he did do that, and it's like a broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah.
And all of that is strategic.
Oh, 100%. And
100%.
It's so reflective in so many of these, like, just grifters, I call them. But even when we look at the manosphere, right, and it's like the same kind of thought and views on the likes of Andrew Tate. Obviously everyone talks about him, you know, and it'll be like, oh, but he says a few good things, and it'll be things like, oh, because he gives advice maybe to young boys about like going to the gym and keeping yourself fit. That could be seen as positive. You know, is wanting to get money a bad thing? No, that could be positive. So you could be seeing that, like, oh, he said a couple of good things, and then there'll just be like the most outrageous, awful, misogynistic shit in there. You're like, oh yeah, like that's bad man. And it's like they know what to do, because they know that how to appeal to a wider audience and how to be able to have this kind of blurriness around them, right? Which let's be honest, I don't think there should be any blurriness around Andrew Tate. But like, you know, in terms of, especially when they're talking to like a male audience, where they think, oh well, they can brush over a lot of the misogyny because it just doesn't really affect them. It's like they know that if they're outright say all this awful shit, that like, oh okay, people aren't really going to back them. But it's like once every now and then they'll say stuff that seem like sensible or reasonable, and then it's like that's enough for them to be able to like then like litter it with like the most like heinous, like whether it's racist or homophobic or misogynistic shit, and be like, oh, but they say some good stuff. You know,
and it makes it easier to listen when they say all that awful shit.
Yeah.
When you just litter it with a few rational points. But I'm thinking about Mondami now. I really like Mondami. I have a few worries about the pedestal that he's been put on.
Yeah.
Because I think one, like I did see a really good tweet actually, and it might have been the TikTok, I don't know. I consume so much media. But I did see one post, and it was basically like, oh, it was the night before he got elected, and it was like, oh, my first night loving Mondami, tomorrow I'll have to treat him like the public servant that he is. And it's like, yeah, good, that's how we should be. Like I do think like I grew up, you would have around the same time as well, the big like Corbynism, and I do think younger me really, I don't get me wrong, I still love and respect Corbyn. I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the way he goes about things now, especially with your party, but I do think like Corbynism did so much for young people, getting them engaged, but did it actually get them to the voting booths, and has it actually improved our future? Because look at where we are now. And I am glad that like Mondami is obviously in New York as a mayor, but one of my worries is the pedestal he's been put on, because I'm like, we shouldn't hold him accountable because he is still a mayor. And also the other side of it is like, he's just a mayor. He's one man.
Yeah.
And he's a mayor, you know? He's not the president of the United States.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's like, yes, it's important. It's an important step. And I think Zach Polanski becoming leader of the Green Party and the big like surge in like memberships of the Green Party is amazing. But also like, it needs to be more than just one person. Like one person cannot change the country, cannot change the continent.
Yeah, it's so true. And also what gets me right is like, you know, I'm thinking about Corbyn and your point and all that, and look, it has been a bit of a fuck up, let's be honest. But I think what is really difficult about the left is like we literally eat and fight each other.
Oh, God,
and it's just like, look, yes, I'm thinking about the your point thing, right? And it's like, as soon as that fuck up went out about the membership, it was like, jump ships, this is it, you know, like they can't be trusted and all that. And it's like, definitely hold them accountable, definitely call them out. But like, we want people in the left to be perfect, and we hold them to such a pedestal, and they do one thing out of touch, and it's like, we're wiping you out, we're writing you off, we're not going to vote for you. And yet you look at the right and you look at the amount of fucked up shit that the likes of Nigel Farage, Donald Trump can do, and their core audience will stand by them side by side. They don't care, they don't hold them accountable. And I think that is wrong. I think we do need to call out and hold people accountable. But it's like,
but what does holding people accountable look like? That's something I always find people interesting when they say take some accountability. Okay, what does that look like to you?
I think like calling people out, like wanting that explanation, expecting that explanation, and expecting better. And if people
an explanation
keep letting
and
you,
an apology.
Yeah, and if people keep letting you down and keep proving it, then absolutely fine. You're like, look, you know, I've given you a chance. But I think we're so quick to be like, oh, and like to be like, we want them to be perfect, and it's like, but that doesn't exist, right? And especially now when we're thinking of trying to like utilize the left and bring people together, and it's like, oh, but I don't agree on their stance on XYZ, and it's like, I get that, and I think it's really, really important. But meanwhile, the right are all coming together. That's one thing they're great at, is coming together, right? And they don't give a shit if someone has said something or done something or fucked up or been caught out in a corruption scandal. Like, they're going to stay by them. And whilst we're trying to reach this perfection, like, we're never going to beat them, you know? And that is what's quite dangerous, I think, by putting these people on pedestals. You know, I saw people, as soon as like Mam Danny, right, when he was in the thing with Trump, and then it seemed to go well, it was like, no, he's sold out. And it's like, but this is politics. Like, we should actually be in the way politics works, it shouldn't be this huge divide. It should be cross-party
work. What do you want him to do? Do you want him to go into the White House and piss on the floor? He can't do that, babe. He's just been elected. He has to go and meet the president, because that is the current system we are in. He's got to work within the system, unless we are going to host a revolution, which I'm sorry, some of you cannot even boycott McDonald's. You are not going to host a fucking revolution tomorrow, are you? So, you know, because we're not going to do that, he's got to work within the systems that he's got to play with. And also something I think the right are very good at is not just ignoring the shady shit that their lot do and not caring about that, but also they're more willing to be like, oh, okay, so are you anti-abortion? Okay, good. Are you anti-LGBT rights? Okay, good. Are you, let's say, anti-immigration? No. Okay, well, we can work on that. And they don't have to agree on everything to invite someone and encourage someone over to their party.
Like, if you're tiny a little bit, right? Or even centrist, they're like, come on in.
They will happily take anyone if it's a vote. And they will work on indoctrinating them. And I think, like, with the left, I'm not saying we should be indoctrinating people on the left. I'm like, hey, let's try mind control, you know, fuck it, let's give it a try. But no, but I do think with the left, it's very much like, oh, okay, they're anti-immigration. They're pro-immigration, they're asylum seeker, they're for asylum seeking rights, they're for disabled rights, they're for LGBTQ rights. But they're not vegan.
Like, they don't think we should nationalise railways or something like that. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
And it'll be like, no, they're not right. Like, they don't fit perfectly. And it's like, but nothing is going to be perfect. Like, we don't live in this perfect world. So it's like, if we're going to try and fight back against this, we cannot be like pinpointing and picking on every little thing. Like, I would say, and again, it's difficult, right? Because I feel like that means that like we should just overlook shit that's like racist or homophobic or transphobic, and we shouldn't. And that is really cool that we don't do that. But it's like, we also need to be able to let people in who maybe like want to learn or want to do better, you know, instead of like outright being like, no, like we cannot do that, or, you know, we have to let people prove us right, like prove their you know, I'm thinking of like politicians and stuff. It's like, okay, prove your worth, like prove it to us. We can't just like write them out, because otherwise like we're just not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And it is really difficult, and I think it prevents a lot of people from wanting to speak out for causes because they're too scared. Like, you know, I'm in this space of like, I speak up a lot about like misogyny, but even then I get worried, like, what if I say the wrong thing, or I use the wrong term, or, you know, if I step out of line and stuff, you know, and I question that as someone who's quite like clued up and educated in the space, right? Like, so like if you're not, you just wouldn't speak up. Well, that's not helping anyone, you know? So I think like that it has to be some kind of room and space for people to learn and grow and also make mistakes. And I think this loops back to like the online world, whereas like before you might say something and be called out for it and then be able to learn from it, and it not like exist as a clip online forever, or like a tweet online forever that you're gonna be like, you know, called up on 15 years later. I think we're in like a really kind of like volatile place right now, and the left just need to figure out a way of working on this together.
And I say this as someone who is left wing, and I say this as someone who does have a bit of a moral superiority complex. I've had to give myself a bit of a fucking talking to in the last few years. It's that we need to just get it fucking together, and it's like all of those issues that you're talking about. I do feel like there are, and it seems to be an overwhelming amount on the left, get like a kick out of it, get a kick out of having this moral superiority. And I say this as someone who grew up a very like, I genuinely think like as a teenager in my early 20s I was like that.
Yeah.
But I think I look at the world we're in, and that didn't mean that I genuinely didn't care about those issues. It wasn't like I was like rooting for those issues to make myself look better. I genuinely cared about them, but the way that like I understood politics and engaged with politics was a very selfish thing, and it was more about my identity. Whereas now I think it's more about looking outward and the impact like on the world, and that has come with age. Now I'm 29. I'm thinking, well, that was more when I was like a teenager in early 20s. But like, I think like people don't realise how dire the situation is politically, and we need to do something now.
Yeah.
Like it's just like watching fuck up after fuck up on the left. I'm like, get it together.
Oh, literally.
Come on,
guys.
I was going to ask you, how are you chasing joy this week? Well, I'm going to rephrase the question a little bit this week, and I'm going to actually ask you, how are you staying sane this week?
Well.
And how are you, knowing all of this and being someone who's very engaged in this, how are you keeping up to date and engaged with this, but also still remaining hope?
Yeah, hopeful is a really big thing, and I think we can't lose sight of that.
Yeah.
How do I stay sane? I mean, it's difficult, very difficult. But I think, you know, what we see online is terrifying, and it is really important, like we spoke about, to actually remember, you know, because people go, oh, well, you know, you step offline because it's not, but no, it is actually, it is real. These are real people who are perpetrating this harm. But also, like, go outside, put your phone away, have a little time away from the screen, like hang out with your mates, you know, go and whether it's like work out or walk your dog, or go have a nice cup of coffee in your favorite coffee like chain, well, not chain, independent, and you know, just things like that bring you joy, little bits of joy, because I think when we talk about all these things, it can feel really like overpowering, and it is that sense of like we can't fix it ourselves. It is something like when you talk about like these billionaires and how like much power they have, and like the tech bros and the government, and it feels like, what can I do? But there are small like things that we can do, like whether that's something, if we talk about online harms, like you can utilize the platform's safety measures. Now the platforms are pretty crap at their content moderating, but they do have safety measures in there. So like if you do see something, like report it, you know, because the more reports they get, they are going to be forced to take more action. They're going to have more data, they're going to gather more data as well. So like, or if they've got the block button, obviously utilize that. Or there's things like hidden keywords, you know, you can utilize that. Like there are actually things in there.
That's a really good feature.
Yeah,
actually.
and if we don't use them, then they're going to delete them as well. You know, they're going to have more reason to. So, you know, things like that. But then also, yeah, finding calm and finding like that time to step away from like, whether it's the news. I think like, you know, some of my friends are like, I never read the news, and I can see why, but I do think it's kind of ignorant. I think it is important, especially like in the times we're living in. Like I think if you're not interested in politics, it's because like you feel like politics doesn't affect you, and it's a very privileged position to be in. So I feel like just totally tapping out like isn't an option. I think like we can't let that happen. We have to be tapped in, but you know, you can tap out for an hour a day.
Yeah. Well, it's like people say, I don't do politics. Well, politics is going to do you.
Amen.
But also as well, you need to live your life. And I think you need to not lose that hope in people. Don't stop talking to people. If you engage with most people in this country, I know there is a scary amount of hate growing more and more every day in this country. But I think most people, if you engage with them, you'll probably have a conversation that might surprise you. And yeah, you might not agree on everything. And as long as it's not something that compromises your or someone else's safety, I think those more everyday conversations are the things that are going to bring us closer together.
What is really unique about us as humans is like our ability to connect and our emotions, and like that is something that they can never ever build, you know, tech to replicate. So like having them conversations and opening up spaces is like one thing that we can do as a rebellion against all of this.
Absolutely. I think like humanity could be a good rebellion to AI. I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Jess. I could literally sit here all evening. I won't because we'll be here for hours. You want to go home.
You probably hear my belly rumbling like sitting here on the
She's
mic.
like, Sophie, let me out. I want to eat. But thank you so much for coming on. Honestly, it's been such an insightful and very cathartic episode for me.
Yeah, it feels like just an hour and a half of like female rage. I love it.
Love that. Thank you for coming on. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.